Chapter 1. The Pioneers. Festina lente. Make haste slowly. The story of electricity in East Africa dates back to 1881, when Sultan Sayyid Bargash bin Said of Zanzibar, inspired by his travels to Europe, seeks to replace the oil lamps lighting his palace and nearby streets with electricity. He installs a steam-driven electric generating plant imported from Europe, the first of its kind in Africa, and way ahead of the rest of the world on the Zanzibar waterfront. By 1904, an American, Joseph Augustus Jones, receives a concession for his company, Zanzibar Electric Company, ZELCO, to light Zanzibar town and also to supply power within a radius of 8 kilometers from the Sultan's home. It takes nearly 30 years before the achievements in Zanzibar are replicated in Kenya, when electricity reaches Nairobi in 1906. The Coming of Light is a 4-part, 110-year history journey into one of the oldest companies in East Africa, the Kenya Power and Lighting Company Limited. Chapter 1, The Pioneers, tells a story of the trailblazers who built the company from virtually nothing. Their crazy adventures, misdemeanors, and the company legacy they would leave behind for others to build upon to this day. In February 1903, a young British electrical engineer, Major Clement Herzl, arrives in Nairobi. The city was then infamously nicknamed Tinville by the early white settlers. On the 8th of April 1904, he receives a concession, Ordinance Number 13 from the Colonial Office, to exclusively supply Nairobi with electricity. Almost immediately, Herzl begins a layout of what he calls the Parklands plot, which is pivotal to the Nairobi electric power and lighting distribution planning. It would receive its power from Ruiru. 3 years later, in March 1907, he starts the construction of a hydroelectric station at Ruiru. Once complete, the power is transmitted to the Parklands station by a single 10,000-volt line. Once at Parklands, the 3-phase transformers step down the 10,000 volts to 2,500 volts. In November 1907, Winston Churchill, then the British Under-Secretary for the Colonies, visits Roiro during his summer tour of the East African colonies. He records, "One of the streams has been dammed effectively, and turbines are already in position to light Nairobi with electricity." Come 1908, Herzl almost puts Nairobi Electric into liquidation. He fails to fulfill a binding contract with Burstall and Monkhouse, a London firm of consulting engineers locally set up and tasked with a contract for final design of the Roiro installations and for supply of electrical equipment. Consequently, he voluntarily forfeits his £5,000 sterling shareholding in order to salvage the company. In 1911, Herzl ventures into car salesmanship and sells the first Ford Model Ts in Kenya. He later goes on to serve as a major for the British Royal Flying Corps in the Second World War. Major Clement Henry Armitage Herzl retires in the Mediterranean aboard his yacht, the Mabruki, named after his Limuru farm. He never makes it back to Kenya. Charles Udall joins the board in 1908 and later serves as the first mayor of Nairobi. In 1920, Udall meets Ernest Carr, a wealthy businessman, and proposes the need for Nairobi Electric to purchase the Mombasa Electric Light and Power Company Limited, owned by the Hassan Ali Jivanji family. Earlier, in 1908, Hassan Ali had purchased the Zanzibar Electric Company plant. Coincidentally, in the same year, Kassam Suleiman Megji formed the Mombasa Electric Light and Power Company Limited. The firm had been granted a 50-year concession by the governor to install a power station and light up Mombasa. In 1909, Hassan Ali sold the Zelco plant to the Mombasa Electric Light and Power Company Limited. Between the years of the First World War, 1914 to 1918, both Nairobi Electric and Mombasa Electric had struggled to stay profitable and satisfy the increase in demand for electricity. In 1921, Nairobi Electric's directors approached the directors of Mombasa Electric and conclude a deal that sees the Nairobi Power Company acquire the Mombasa Company and immediately merges all assets and infrastructure. The intention of this merger is to add just under 3,000 kilowatts to the 800 kilowatts Nairobi Electric already generates, so as to build enough capacity to satisfy the demand for electricity in Nairobi and cope with the demand in the next few years. And on 2nd January 1922, the East African Power and Lighting Company is formed, with a hybrid of directors and shareholders from both the Nairobi and Mombasa boards. And in 1924, the first project undertaken by the new company in Mombasa is the construction of a new power station at Shimanzi, off the Kilindini shore. The merger marks a new era of electric power and lighting in Kenya. In 1923, EAPL unsuccessfully floats its company shares in the world market, following which John G.B. Stone in November 1924 initiates a move to appoint the Balfour Beatty Company as London managers so as to attract more financial capital. Under the East African Power and Lighting Company Limited, Charles Udall becomes its first general manager and spearheads the merger. Previously, he was an electrical engineer working at the Roiro power station. In 1927, he resigns from the company after 19 years of service. He embarks on a new journey, supplying gravestones and Kapiti Plains marble. In May 1927, Dennis Finch Hatton is appointed a director of EAPL. Infamous for skipping company board meetings, on 6th May 1931, he unexpectedly turns up for one, his first in over a year. Straight from it, he visits Karen Blixen and thereafter decides to fly solo to his place in Takaungu, Voi. The next morning, his plane crashes and he dies. The board records his death the same month. In 1964, Robert Ouko is named the first African board member. He fights for African representation within the board, and on 24th October 1966, under Articles 103 and 104, the company passes a resolution to delete a clause that reads, "Provided also that every director of the company shall be of European descent." He later serves as Kenya's foreign minister from 1979 to 1983 and 1988 to 1990. Isaac Lugonzo joins the board in 1966. Lugonzo is elected as Nairobi's first African mayor in 1967. Arthur Goge is appointed company secretary in January 1969. He is Kenya's first African company secretary. In 1970, Mr. Julius K. Geshau is appointed by the government as the chairman and chief executive of the board of East African Power and Lighting Company Limited. Geshau had attended Church of Scotland Mission Primary School in Kikuyu for his early education and later Alliance High School. He then joined Ewing Christian College in India, where he graduated with honours in economics, political science and English in 1953. In 1956, he took his Masters of Arts studies at the London School of Economics, followed by an internship at the British American Tobacco in the UK. Geshau would work as a personnel manager for the East African Tobacco Company before being appointed to head the EAPL. With that, we come to the end of part 1 of our 4-part story titled The Coming of Light.